So this is the time of the year when we're going to see a lot of price cuts. For buyers, that's really exciting, and for sellers, it sucks. Over the next few months, you're going to see nearly 20% of homes cut their price, and if you're selling, I don't want your home to be one of them. I'm going to break down the 5 biggest reasons that homes don't sell, and I'm also going to tell you how to fix every single one of them. We're going to talk a little bit about seasonality. What times of year can you expect to see these reductions and these big cuts? And also, what time of year will you see the most appreciation? Armed with this information, you can time the market as best as you can so that you can make as much money possible when selling your home. We're going to be back here every single Monday at 5 p.m. with a new video to help you be successful in the San Francisco real estate market. Let's dive in. Reason number 1, your home is just too expensive. Honestly, any home will sell for the right price. I'm going to tell you, I've yet to meet a seller that tells me that there's something that's more important to them than getting the highest price for their home. Also, many sellers, not all, but many sellers, I think it's a little bit human nature to think that your home is maybe better than every other home on the block, and that yours is truly, truly special, and that there's a reason that even though some comps look similar, yours is going to sell for a lot more than those comps. Also, I think that it's normal. You know that you have to buy your next house and you need to make as much money possible so that you can get the best next house, right? I think I can speak for all realtors when I say that we want to help you sell your house for the highest price. But the way that you're going to do that is actually by truly understanding the price of your home, the market value of your home. What you need to do first is you need to take a really honest look at the comps. And I also want to tell you, I completely understand. My husband, if you ask him, what would you sell your house for? He'll quote a number that is, and he's married to a realtor, 5 times the market value of that home. He really genuinely believes that our view is a one-of-a-kind view and it's completely irreplaceable. You know what that means? We are never moving, which is good because I like my house. Trying to step back and look at these comps as they truly are with someone who you trust, I think is really important. And I'm going to offer something a bit controversial. I would say as a seller, you should eliminate from your interview process the price of your home. I think it's really normal. Like, how would you not want to hire the agent who tells you that your home is worth the highest over the range, right? Like, let's just say your home is worth $2.5 million and there's an agent who comes in and tells you it's worth 3. Like, you're going to love that agent, right? But that is a recipe for failure, right? So if you just eliminate the price, evaluate the agents on their merit, who has the most experience, who's the most honest, and who has the best track record for selling a house like yours, focus on that and hire the agent and then review the comps. And that's going to help get you to the right number and make sure, I'm not saying that an agent would intentionally try to trick you, but yes, there may be some agents who tell you a little bit of what you want to hear, knowing that once you move out, once you stage your house, that if it doesn't sell, then you'll reduce and eventually you will sell. But there is real damage in that approach, and I'm going to jump into why. So days on market in San Francisco really, really can be the kiss of death. So if you start your price too high, once you pass the 14-day mark, it's very clear to all the experienced agents in the market that you're not going to be getting multiple offers. It's not to say that it never happens, but it's pretty rare. So at that point, it's like, okay, the price of your house is not whatever it's been priced at. And then the question is, like, how long will it take for the seller to realize that? So sometimes buyers will sit back and watch those houses. And the problem is that if it was priced right to begin with, that you can generate multiple offers that can often exceed that price. But once you hit 14 days and even getting on 30, then people start to smell blood in the water. And the weird thing is, and I think a lot of sellers think like, well, they'll bring me an offer that's within striking distance or something like that. But often if a house is not priced within about 5% of what it's worth, believe it or not, a lot of buyers, I try to encourage them otherwise, but a lot of them don't feel like it's worth their time to make an offer. And then honestly, like after about 30 days, that house, it kind of gets a black mark on it. People think, what's wrong with it? And they really start to question question, do I want this house? Because no one else wants this house. Everybody wants a house that everybody else wants. So in San Francisco, because things do sell so quickly, it's really, really important to sell fast. The only way that you can sell fast is by pricing correctly. Now, when I say pricing correctly, that can really depend on the price point of your home, because sometimes pricing correctly might be pricing $500,000 or even more lower than the list price. It really depends. We will give a range, right? So we make sure before we take a listing that the seller and I are on the same page about the ranges of the house. That's the range that it will sell for. In terms of deciding the list price, what we want to do is the week before we're going on the market, we want to look at everything that has sold, everything that's not selling. That's a very important data point, and figure out with the seller, okay, here's a couple of different paths and strategies for pricing this home. And here's some successful ones that we would recommend, which may be lower pricing. So I would say below the $5 million mark in most neighborhoods, not all. There's not a one-size-fits-all strategy, but in most neighborhoods, pricing lower is going to get you to the highest price point. Once you go over 5, not always, but once you go over 5, sometimes pricing more accurately at market can be more effective. And again, that's going to depend a little bit on the neighborhood. So you really want to look at the strategies, look at what's worked with your agent that you trust, and pick an appropriate pricing strategy that's going to help you sell the house for the most money possible. This is the most critical thing about selling your house quickly and getting the highest price point for your home. So I did mention that above $5 million, that often things are priced more accurately, but I actually saw this home the other day that was listed for $6.7 million, and it's right now in contract for over $9 million and got 4 offers on it. So this is one thing that's hard to believe for sellers, but San Francisco is an incredibly efficient market. If you price low, almost always there'll be good enough agents who understand the comps and help the buyers understand the comps when there's competition to get them to the number that is the value. And if they're fighting over it, they're going to push as high as possible. So if that house was priced for 9 or 10, would it have actually sold there? It's hard to say, because often homes in that price point are priced so high that people will come in under. So again, there's not a one-size-fits-all strategy, but I would just say working with your agent to make sure that you do not overprice in most cases is going to be a good rule of thumb. The more eyes that you're going to get on your property, the more feet that you're going to get in the door, the higher the price is going to sell for the home. One thing to really, really keep in mind here, you guys, is that there is not a redo. I often wish there was the books that you could follow where you could start over. But if you price wrong, that history is then in the MLS, and often it's very hard to undo that history without having years go by. Yes, you can delist your home for 30 days and then relist it as new, but all of that history is still very, very available, and it's very easy to see. And the buyers are still thinking, what is wrong with this home? Why didn't it sell? And they're really looking at it with like a magnifying glass. Instead of thinking about what's right and how can I get it, they're thinking about what's wrong and maybe I shouldn't buy it. So it's just a bad way to get the highest price. It is difficult to sell a house on a super busy street, or a house that doesn't have parking, or that doesn't have good outdoor space. I can honestly name 100 other things that make it hard to sell a home in specific pricing bands. But honestly, all of these things fade into the background and become less important if the price is low, and then you get competition going, and then it bids it up to market value. So what I could tell you is super, super critical is getting that price right out of the gate. All right, enough about pricing. Let's move into number 2. Scary disclosures is another reason why properties don't sell. And this is something that can be often fixed or mitigated. So we had a property that we were prepping to sell this fall. Such a cute little single family home with all of the old world details. The seller had painstakingly kept a lot of the charm that people love in these old classic San Francisco Victorian homes. We walked through, we loved it, but when we did the inspection on it, we found the roof needed to be replaced. There was also a leak in one of the pipes, and it caused a lot of rot and damage. Inspection report came in at over $40,000. So, and we were literally getting ready to go on the market, and we just told the client, we have to fix this stuff. We cannot sell this house this way. So we paused. And really what we were thinking in that moment is, if we were representing a buyer, could we suggest to the buyer, when we read that disclosure package, would we say, maybe this is a home that you wouldn't buy? On a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being the best for a disclosure package, we see this disclosure package as a 3 or a 4. If it's below a 5, it definitely becomes questionable about if you're buying it at all. And somewhere in that 5, 6, 7 zone, it affects how much we recommend they pay for the price of the house. So the last thing we want to get into is selling a place that people are going to be discounting it by hundreds of thousands of dollars or not buying it at all. So in those cases, fixing some of those things, replacing the roof, fixing the pest report. What is a pest report? Let's talk about that real quick. Is the report that says all of the dry rot damages, all of the water damages, things that need to be fixed. And if something is $40,000, the pest inspector is saying those things need to be fixed sooner rather than later. On an average home, we're seeing a $9,000 report. So a $40,000 report is really, really significant. Also, a roof needing to be fixed means that the house may not be insurable, which is something that I'm going to talk about as another reason in a minute. So for that house, when we were looking at it, we were literally thinking this house with this current disclosure package may sell for hundreds of thousands of dollars less than we valued it, or may not sell at all. So that's a big stop for us. Obviously, these are all choices that the seller has to make, and we're only here to recommend them. But they did take our advice, and I think ultimately it's going to help them make hundreds of thousands of dollars more. What's something else that could really scare a buyer in an inspection? So a bad foundation could really scare a buyer. And I think people have tolerance for foundations. We have brick foundations in San Francisco, but a questionable foundation that needs replaced could be like a $300,000 or $400,000 problem. So that's a pretty big problem. And so if we see like a large crack in a foundation on something that we're buying or selling, it's definitely like we may need to get a structural engineer in to look at it. So just as an example, recently I sold a property with a buyer, and when we reviewed the disclosure package, they're like, we want the house, we want the house. We reviewed the disclosure package. The report for the foundation, what I told the buyer is like, this could be really bad or it could be nothing. I really can't tell by what I'm reading in this contractor's inspection report, but I don't feel comfortable making an offer on this house either without a contingency or without some more information. So we were able to bring in early, like the next day, we scrambled, we got in a structural engineer to look at the property. Offers were due a few days later, and evaluate the foundation. And it turned out the foundation actually did need quite a bit of work. It did not need a full replacement, but it needed a bit of work. So my buyers were able to understand the cost of that work, the risk of that work, and they decided to go ahead and write an offer, not at the price that they were initially intending to write. And what was interesting is that the listing agent thought that they were getting several offers. Come offer date, it turned out that we were the only people who were interested in writing, probably because we were the only people who had that information. Had that listing agent done that inspection up front and provided it in the disclosure package, more than likely 2 or 3 of those other people that really were interested in the home would have competed with my buyer, and my buyer would have had to pay several hundreds of thousands of dollars more to get that house. It was all manageable work, but it was just a big unknown, right? So providing those things up front is super, super important and could ultimately make or cost you hundreds of thousands of dollars. In this case, my buyers really benefited from saving hundreds of thousands of dollars, which is awesome, and they felt like it was a huge win. So when we're evaluating disclosures, there's definitely things that are normal. I mean, the houses that we sell here, you guys, they're 100 years old plus, right? There are things that are normal, like some amount of unpermitted work is considered normal, especially if it was like from 10 years ago, not from yesterday. We don't want to see that somebody has done work unpermitted for sale. Absolutely do not want to see that. But ungrounded plugs, even knob and tube wiring, it's important to know about that with insurance. But there's a lot of things that are somewhat normal, and there are other things that are not normal. So it's important to work with an agent that can let you know, like, for this disclosure package, Is it in that below 5 range? How are buyers going to see it? Is there something that we should do to fix or mitigate this so that we can make buyers more comfortable and help you get multiple offers on this home and sell for the highest price that it can sell for while you're spending as minimal money as possible? So number 3, moving on to insurance. Insurance challenges can really prevent a home from selling, and it's something that should be able to be foreseen ahead of time by an agent who's really savvy. So that's one of the things that we were actually really worried about with the roof of the house that I mentioned before. While we're prepping it, we called several insurance companies when we found that the roof needed to be replaced, and they said that they would require replacement within 30 days of the close of escrow. So we're worried that for a buyer, like this is an entry-level house in the like $1.8 to $2 million zone. Those buyers have probably never owned a house before, and the idea of needing to replace a roof is really scary. And they're like, can I get someone? Is it hard? What's the permitting process like? So we're just worried that they may move on. And I think that's a very, very real possibility when we can handle getting a roofer in, getting that replaced, making sure that the house can be insured. It's scary to buy a house where somebody's saying like they're not going to insure it. So I would say if there's anything that would stop the house from being insured, making sure that that's fixed. Another thing that I would replace if it came up would be a Federal Pacific box. A lot of these houses in San Francisco, they have these Federal Pacific boxes. They were all recalled a long time ago. And we've seen these in disclosures forever. They were just left in place because people honestly weren't that worried about them. But now when insurance companies are finding out about them, they are requiring replacement. So that's going to be something that's going to stop from insuring, or it's going to have to be done and replaced within 30 days. And honestly, it could be something that somebody just says, I don't want to buy a house that can't be insured. It just feels psychologically really bad. But replacing that box is probably going to be between $5,000 and $10,000. So, but then it could cost you hundreds of thousands of dollars if someone won't buy the house or only one person shows up. So that's definitely going to be something that we're going to recommend replacing. Maybe you think I'm just like making all of this up because you never heard of any problems with insurance. You're like, I have an old roof and I have insurance just fine. But what I'm telling you is just because you have insurance now does not mean that when your house resells that you're still going to be able to get insurance. The whole insurance situation has massively changed in the last probably 18 months. So the California insurance market, if you haven't heard, it's a little bit of a mess. I'm sure you've heard some stuff about it, but a lot of insurance companies have fled the state. Basically, they're really overwhelmed by the escalating risk of wildfires, other natural disasters. 2017, 2018 wiped out a lot of these insurance companies. Honestly, to make matters a lot worse, construction costs in the area have gone up, honestly, at staggering numbers. In an attempt to protect consumers from insurance costs being too high, the California Department of Real Estate refused to approve any sort of rate increases. Unfortunately, this backfired, and as a result, there's a lot of carriers that have left. This means that a lot of homeowners are either left without insurance or having to find insurance through more expensive plans. I'm hoping that all this gets fixed in the next few years, but right now, the reality of selling a house and owning a house has been that we need to identify the red flags on both sides of the transaction. So we really need to know a few things when we're selling a house. Other things that can be red flags is a combination of things. So if the roof is older, if there's knob and tube wiring, if the foundation is considered like damaged, that can be one. If it's built before 1900. So if you have a combination of these things, then a lot of times when you're buying, important to make sure that you know what the insurance is going to cost. And when you're selling, making sure that you know that when you put your house on the market, that the next buyer can get insurance. Just being on top of that up front, because if you go to market without knowing this stuff, and then you start to get the feedback, oh my gosh, these buyers have been advised to look for insurance and they can't get it, or it's going to require replacement of these things. And then you get that situation where your house is sitting on the market, accumulating days, not getting offers, and basically decreasing in value with every day that passes. So that can be a big mess, and that can cost you a lot of money, and I don't want that to happen to you. So now that we have your insurance squared away, what else could mess up the sale of your house or cost you money when selling? So number 4 is tenant-occupied properties. In general, selling a home with a tenant in it is going to cost you about 20% of the value of the house. If there's a tenant in the property, first of all, the renter's rights and the tenant rights in San Francisco are heavily weighted in favor of the tenants. And most people are not looking to buy a home with a tenant in it. They're looking to buy a home that they can move into. One of the best ways to sell your house for the most amount of money is to get the most people in the door. And the way that you do that is not just by pricing, but also making sure that the house is prepped properly. And if you have a tenant in there, you can't stage it, you can't paint it, you can't do updates. And often just showing it is a bit of a hassle. You have to arrange for showing with the tenant. Those are going to make your house sell for a lot less. So if you've moved out of your house, you're maybe trying to time the market and you decided to rent it for a while and now you're thinking about selling it, then, I would say there's a couple of things that you could do. It depends on the house that you have. You should probably consult with an attorney because different products have different kinds of rental restrictions and tenant rights on them. In some cases, the rent can be increased when the lease is up. In some cases, it cannot. So what most people do is either consult with an attorney about maybe a buyout, or they just wait until the tenant gives notice and then they sell the house at that time. Unfortunately, with that strategy, you can't really think about seasonality, which is something that I touched on earlier. So when is the best time to sell a house in San Francisco? If your tenant happens to give notice in March and they're going to move out in May, then that means that you might be putting your house on the market in the summer. Depending on what kind of house you have, the summer may not be the best time to sell it. So in general, just kind of the brief understanding of seasonality in San Francisco is that the majority of the appreciation is spring loaded. So it's going to be found in the spring. The spring in San Francisco starts early as January. You can start listing houses because we don't have a winter here, right? As soon as people come back from the holidays, they're ready to buy houses. They haven't been able to buy a house for a while because there's been nothing on the market for November, December, January. So they're ready. We have buyers right now that are ready and there's not going to be inventory for a while. It's very sad. We're looking around for off-market properties and all kinds of things. But come January, they're going to be every house that comes on the market. I'm I want to buy this one. And we're going to have to be talking them out of it if it's not a good house. But majority of appreciation is in the spring. And then the spring ends really at the end of May. And then summertime is a little bit slower. A lot of people are on vacation. A lot of people are out of town. And then the fall is a very fast market. You just have September and October. So it's very, very tight. You end up with a lot of competition as a homeowner during that time because you have such a condensed amount of inventory in only 2 months. But it's a very hot selling season. And then basically come November and December, all of the houses that didn't sell, many of them start doing price drops that are left for November and December, and then it kind of starts all over again. So if you could pick any time to sell a house and you just, had all of the flexibility, which you don't have when you have a tenant-occupied property, then springtime is going to be your best bet for the most amount of appreciation. If you have a tenant, I would recommend waiting until they give notice, possibly. Otherwise, selling it with a tenant in it is typically going to mean that you're going to trade for 20% less than with a tenant out. So hopefully that's helpful. So the last reason, number 5, ties in really closely to having a tenant because as I mentioned, we can't prep the home with a tenant in it. And so number 5 is that your house is not prepped or marketed properly. So this honestly can be a combination of some things. Let me give you a few examples. So recently we sold this house and it had a lot of living space. So it had this living room. It also had a living room here, and you had a dining room. Then you went into the kitchen. There was 3 bedrooms, and then you went upstairs and you had another living space. So a lot of living space. And then you had another living space. So this ended up being a pretty big challenge, right? Because you had 3 bedrooms and just a lot of space to party. And so we started thinking about that and realizing okay, we need to solve this. And so how did we solve that? We came up with some renderings And so we basically designed where you could put another room here. So this is the upstairs. So we did this rendering to show that you could come up the stairs, have another little living room here, and then walk down a hallway and go into this other living room, but also walk into this door and have a bedroom. So then you have a fourth bedroom in this space. So thinking through things like this, it's like the seller didn't have to spend anything to do this, but to allow buyers to be able to see something that they could do very inexpensively really made a big difference. We also did a rendering of the roof deck. This is what the roof looks like. And then we spent the money to have this built because as you're walking up these stairs here, like these beautiful stairs, you walk right out onto this roof. And so it just made sense to show the buyers what they could do with this space. There have also been many times where I felt like I've gotten my buyers a really good deal because the house needed some cosmetic adjustments and the buyers just couldn't see through it. We're pretty good at helping buyers see through that stuff. I have a background in interior design and just, we tell buyers all the time, like, let us help you fix this stuff and help you understand the cost of that. But I think that's rare. So things like a bunch of different kinds of flooring, like maybe the kitchen has stone and then there's wood somewhere else and it's a small space, and so it actually makes the space look a lot smaller. That can really break up a house and make it look disjointed. Or maybe there's like a different kind of flooring in the bedrooms. It's just like not a good look. And honestly, fixing flooring is not that expensive. That's an example of, again, a way to kind of look at the house with honest eyes and figure out what are going to be the problems in selling this house, the things that buyers are concerned about, and how can we address those things going in. I saw a 2-unit building recently. It was on the market and it was only for sale. You could buy the whole building. And I walked through it. I think it was like $5 million. A lot of times big houses, like $5-6 million houses, they actually do have another unit in them, but the house flows nicely as a single family. This was clearly 2 units. There was no way to use it as a whole house. It would have to be 2 separate, like a family maybe like who wanted to have their parents living downstairs or their sister living downstairs or their best friend. Anyway, the house didn't sell. And I was thinking, why didn't the agent market this both ways? So selling it as a 2-unit TIC where you offer both units separately and selling it as a multi-unit building. So you could take offers from either party. And ultimately, like 3 or 4 months later, they did change it that way and it did sell. But that was after it had sat on the market for over 60 days and ultimately sold for a lot less. So that's an example of a mistake where that could have been avoided out of the gate, and it would have been a lot more financially advantageous for the seller to have that property marketed properly from the get-go. Another place that I think that people can really mess up is like not showing bedrooms that could be bedrooms. A 3-bedroom condo or a 3-bedroom house is going to sell for a lot more money. Like it could be $100,000, $200,000 more than a 2-bedroom plus an office and a nursery. You might say like, oh, well, it's really easy for somebody to see that a small room could add a bed to it. But I'm telling you, people have major spatial issues. They can work backwards, but they can't work forwards. And what I mean by that is if you've got a small space, but you put the biggest bed in there that you can, people can know like, oh, I could put a desk in there, or oh, I could put a nursery in there. But if you have a nursery in there or you have an office in there, they think like, oh, there's no way a bed would fit in here. I've seen this so many times, I cannot tell you. And buyers are not going to spend the same amount for a 3-bedroom as they will for a 2-bedroom plus an office. So an example of this, I'm going to show you, and it's not sexy because it would look better to actually show it as an office or show it as a nursery, like spatially, right? To have like space around it. But my goal is to make my sellers the most money. So let me show you one. So this is a place, I loved this place that we sold on Jackson. Look how beautiful it is. Nice big rooms here, but this room, this is the one I wanted to show you, right? It doesn't look that great. I'm being honest, right? The bed is like tight in there. There's just this one little side table. This would be a cute little office or nursery, which is how my clients used it. But this is a full-size bed. And so we needed to show a room with a full-size bed so that people know, because trust me, you guys, like people will be happy to use this in some cases as a bedroom, not just nursery or an office. So that is going to help the house sell for as much money as possible. So there are so many fatal mistakes that can happen if you don't have proper advice from the get-go. If you're struggling to sell, or you just want to make sure that your home sells quickly and for the best price, feel free to reach out to me. My team and I have helped sell over 1,000 homes in San Francisco, and we'd love to help you too. Just call or text me at the number below, or send us an email. We'd love to help you with the process. If you want to watch another video about selling, watch this to understand how to win the game of real estate in San Francisco.